The icy wind cut through Katherine Drummond's threadbare coat like 1,000 knives as she stood alone on the wooden platform of the Nogales train station, watching the last wisps of smoke from the departing locomotive disappear into the gray December sky of 1883. Her fingers had long since gone numb, clutching the single carpetbag that held everything she owned in this world, and her feet felt like blocks of ice in her worn leather boots, despite the 2 pairs of stockings she wore. The man who had promised to meet her, the man whose letters had been filled with declarations of devotion and promises of a new life in the Arizona Territory, was nowhere to be seen, and with each passing moment, the terrible truth settled deeper into her bones alongside the cold. She had been standing there for 3 hours now, ever since the train from Kansas City had pulled away, leaving her stranded in this border town she had never seen before. The station master had gone home an hour ago, locking the small office behind him with barely a glance in her direction. The few other passengers who had disembarked had been met by waiting families or had hurried off into the town with purpose in their steps. Katherine had nowhere to go. Her entire life savings, spent on the train ticket, left her with exactly $4.37 to her name. The address written on the letters in her bag led to a boarding house that did not exist. She had learned from a passing merchant. Everything had been a lie. The sky was darkening now, the unusual cold front that had swept down from the north bringing with it a biting wind that felt more like Colorado than southern Arizona. Katherine's teeth chattered so violently she bit her tongue, tasting copper. Her vision blurred with tears that she refused to let fall, refused to give in to the despair that threatened to swallow her whole. She had survived worse than this, she told herself. She had survived her parents' death from fever when she was 16. She had survived 2 years working in a textile mill where the air was so thick with lint it felt like drowning. She had survived her aunt's cruelty and her cousin's wandering hands. She would survive this too, somehow. "Miss, you are going to freeze to death if you stay out here much longer," a voice said behind her, deep and warm with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas origins. Katherine spun around, nearly losing her balance on the ice-slicked platform. The man standing there was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders encased in a heavy sheepskin coat. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though at the moment his expression was serious, concerned. Those eyes were a striking shade of hazel, more green than brown in the fading light, and they studied her with an intensity that made her take an involuntary step backward. A dark brown hat sat low on his head, and she could see strands of sandy brown hair curling at his collar. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most. "I am waiting for someone," Katherine said, her voice barely above a whisper, hoarse from the cold and from not speaking for hours. The cowboy's expression softened. "I have been watching you from the saloon across the way for the past hour. No one is coming, are they?" The kindness in his voice was almost worse than indifference would have been. Katherine felt something crack inside her chest, but she held her spine straight. "That is none of your concern, sir." "Maybe not," he agreed, "but I cannot in good conscience walk away and let you freeze. My name is Fletcher Vaughn, and I own a ranch about 10 miles north of here. I came into town for supplies and to meet the train myself, though the man I was expecting to arrive about a ranch hand position never showed. Seems we are both disappointed today." Katherine stared at him, trying to determine if this was another trap, another lie. But there was something in his weathered face, in those steady eyes, that spoke of honesty. Or perhaps she was simply too cold and too desperate to care anymore. "Katherine Drummond," she managed, Pleased to meet you, Miss Drummond, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Now, I have a proposition for you, and I want you to listen before you say no. The boarding house at the end of Main Street is run by Mrs. Henderson, a good woman who will give you a room for the night. I will pay for it, and for your supper, no strings attached. In the morning, when you have had a chance to rest and think clearly, you can decide what you want to do. If you want to head back east, I will buy you a ticket. If you want to stay and look for work, I can ask around. But right now, you need to get warm before you lose your toes to frostbite. I cannot accept charity from a stranger, Katherine said automatically, though even as she spoke the words, she swayed on her feet, dizzy from cold and hunger. She had not eaten since the previous evening, saving her last few coins. Fletcher Vaughn stepped closer, his hand reaching out to steady her elbow. It is not charity. Consider it one human being helping another. Miss Drummond, I mean you no harm, but you will not last another hour out here. Please, let me help you. Why? The word came out broken, confused. Why would you help me? Something flickered across his face, an old pain that he quickly masked. Because 5 years ago, my sister found herself in a similar situation. She was not as fortunate as you are tonight. Someone should have helped her. Someone should have cared. So I am helping you, if you will let me. The simple honesty of his words cut through Katherine's defenses. She nodded once, a jerky movement, and nearly collapsed. Fletcher caught her, his arm strong around her waist, and picked up her carpetbag with his other hand as though it weighed nothing. Come on, let us get you inside. The walk to the boarding house was only 3 blocks, but to Katherine it felt like miles. She was aware of Fletcher's solid presence beside her, supporting more of her weight than she wanted to admit, and of the curious stares from the few people still on the streets, despite the cold. The boarding house, when they reached it, was a 2-story wooden structure with warm light glowing from the windows. Fletcher helped her up the steps and knocked firmly on the door. A plump woman in her 50s opened it, her round face creasing with concern when she saw Katherine's condition. Good Lord, Fletcher, what have you got here? Mrs. Henderson, this is Miss Katherine Drummond. She needs a room for the night, a hot meal, and probably a doctor to check for frostbite. Can you help her? Of course, bring her in immediately. Mrs. Henderson ushered them into a warm parlor where a fire crackled in a stone fireplace. You poor dear, you are frozen through. Fletcher, help me get her near the fire. Not too close, mind, we need to warm her up gradually. The next hour passed in a blur for Katherine. Mrs. Henderson and her daughter Clara fussed over her, removing her wet boots and stockings, wrapping her in thick quilts, bringing her hot tea with honey, and then a bowl of beef stew with fresh bread. Fletcher had disappeared at some point, and Katherine felt oddly bereft at his absence, which was foolish considering she had only just met the man. The warmth gradually seeped back into her limbs, bringing with it a painful tingling sensation that made her gasp. That is good, Mrs. Henderson said approvingly. Means nothing is permanently damaged. You are lucky that young man found you when he did. Fletcher Vaughn is one of the good ones, he is. Lost his whole family in a Comanche raid when he was just a boy, raised by his uncle on a ranch in Texas. Came out here 5 years ago and built up a good spread, runs cattle and horses. Works hard, keeps to himself mostly, but he will always help someone in need. He mentioned his sister, Katherine said softly. Mrs. Henderson's expression grew sad. Yes, poor Emma. She came west to be a mail-order bride, but the man who sent for her was not what he claimed. She died giving birth to his child less than a year after arriving. Fletcher tried to get to her in time when he heard, but he was in Texas and she was in New Mexico. By the time he found out where she was, she had already passed. He blames himself, though it was not his fault. He was only 23 himself, barely more than a boy. Catherine's chest tightened with understanding. That was why he had helped her. She reminded him of his sister, of a tragedy he could not prevent. The knowledge stung a little, even though she knew she should be grateful rather than feeling this odd disappointment. What had she expected? That a handsome cowboy had helped her out of personal interest. She was not a beauty, with her dark blonde hair that never held a curl and her too thin frame and her plain face. Men did not look twice at Katherine Drummond. The door to the parlor opened and Fletcher returned, his hat in his hands. His gaze went immediately to Katherine, assessing, and some of the tension left his shoulders when he saw she looked better. "Doc Miller said he would stop by in the morning to check on you, but Mrs. Henderson says you are doing well enough." "Thank you," Katherine said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "I do not know how I can repay you for your kindness, Mr. Vaughn. Fletcher, please, and there is nothing to repay. I am just glad I was there." He shifted his weight, suddenly seeming uncomfortable. "I should let you rest. Mrs. Henderson will take good care of you. I will come by in the morning, if that is acceptable, to see how you are doing and discuss what you would like to do next." "You do not have to do that," Katherine protested. "I know I do not have to. I want to." His eyes met hers and something passed between them, some spark of connection that Katherine could not name. "Get some sleep, Miss Drummond. Things always look better in the morning." After he left, Mrs. Henderson showed Katherine to a small but comfortable room on the second floor. The bed was soft, the quilts warm, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Katherine felt safe. She fell asleep almost immediately, too exhausted to even properly process the events of the day. She woke the next morning to pale sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of bacon frying. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and then it all came rushing back. The train station. The cold. Fletcher Vaughn's kind eyes and strong arms. Katherine sat up slowly, relieved to find that while her feet were tender, they did not seem permanently damaged. Her body ached from the cold she had endured, but she felt remarkably better after a full night's sleep in a warm bed. Clara brought her a basin of warm water to wash with and helped her dress. Katherine's clothes were wrinkled from being in the carpet bag, but they were clean at least. She had brought 3 dresses with her, all practical cotton in dark colors, and she chose the deep blue one as it was the least wrinkled. As she pinned up her hair, she studied her reflection in the small mirror on the dresser. She looked pale and tired, shadows under her blue-gray eyes, but alive. That was something. Breakfast was a hearty affair of bacon, eggs, biscuits, and gravy, served in a dining room with 4 other boarders, all men who worked in town. They were polite but curious, clearly wondering about the new arrival. Katherine kept her eyes on her plate and spoke only when directly addressed. She was halfway through her second biscuit when there was a knock at the front door, and her heart jumped foolishly. Mrs. Henderson returned a moment later with Fletcher following behind her. He looked different in the morning light, dressed in clean denim trousers and a dark blue shirt, his hat in his hands and his hair still damp as though he had recently bathed. His eyes found Katherine immediately, and he smiled, a slow, warm expression that transformed his serious face into something approaching handsome. "Miss Drummond, you look much improved. I am glad to see it." Katherine set down her biscuit, suddenly self-conscious. "I feel much better, thank you." "Please sit down. Have you eaten?" "Hours ago, but I would not say no to coffee." Fletcher took the chair across from her, and Mrs. Henderson bustled off to fetch him a cup. Once she was gone, he leaned forward slightly, his expression growing serious. "I have been thinking about your situation. I asked around town this morning, but there is not much work available for women in Nogales right now. The dress shop has all the seamstresses it needs, and the hotel has a full staff. You could try the saloon, but I would not recommend it." Catherine's heart sank. She had expected as much, but hearing it confirmed made her situation feel even more desperate. "I see. Then I suppose I will need to accept your offer of a train ticket back east, though I am not sure where I would go. I have no family left." "There is another option," Fletcher said slowly, as though choosing his words carefully. "I need help at the ranch. My housekeeper quit 2 months ago to go live with her daughter in Tucson, and I have been managing on my own, but I am not much of a cook, and the house is becoming a disaster. I also have a foreman and 3 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, and they used to take meals at the main house. Now they are cooking for themselves, and I am fairly certain they are all going to die of food poisoning if something does not change soon." Katherine stared at him. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Vaughn?" "Fletcher." "And yes, I suppose I am. Room and board plus $30 a month. You would have your own room, of course, separate from the men's quarters. You would be responsible for cooking, cleaning, laundry, that sort of thing. It is hard work. I will not lie about that, but it is honest work and you would be safe. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I give you my word that I would never take advantage of you or allow anyone else to. You would be an employee, nothing more." The offer was generous, almost too generous, and Catherine's first instinct was suspicion. But when she looked into Fletcher's eyes, she saw only sincerity. "Why me? You do not know anything about me. I could be a terrible cook. Can you make biscuits as good as the one you are eating?" "Yes, actually. Better if I have the right ingredients. Then you are hired if you want the job. As for why you, well, you need work and I need help. Sometimes the solution is that simple." He paused, then added, "And I feel responsible for you now. Call it foolishness if you want, but after finding you at that station, I cannot just wash my hands of you and walk away. At least at the ranch, I know you would be looked after." Katherine considered the offer. It was either this or return east to what? More mill work. Another aunt who might take her in out of obligation. The streets. At least here she would have a roof over her head and honest employment. And if Fletcher Vaughn turned out to be less honorable than he seemed, well, she had survived worse than bad men before. "I accept your offer," she said, lifting her chin. "But I want to be clear that this is a business arrangement. I will work hard and earn my keep, but I will not tolerate any improper advances from anyone." Fletcher held out his hand across the table. "You have my word, Miss Drummond." "This is purely business." Katherine shook his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. His hand was warm and large, engulfing hers completely. "Then I suppose I should call you Fletcher, and you should call me Katherine." "Katherine," he repeated, and something about the way he said her name, slow and thoughtful, made her pulse quicken. "We should head out soon. I have supplies to load, and I would like to get back before dark. The cold front is supposed to break today, but I do not want to risk it." 2 hours later, Katherine found herself seated on a wagon next to Fletcher, her carpetbag at her feet and crates of supplies filling the bed behind them. Nogales disappeared behind them as Fletcher guided the 2-horse team north along a well-worn road. The landscape was unlike anything Katherine had seen before. All rolling hills dotted with mesquite and scrub oak, the distant mountains rising purple against the horizon. The unusual cold was already breaking, the temperature rising as the sun climbed higher, though the wind still had bite to it. Fletcher was not much of a talker, Katherine discovered, but his silence was comfortable rather than awkward. He pointed out landmarks as they traveled, telling her about the area in short, simple sentences. When they stopped to rest the horses at a small creek, he helped her down from the wagon with easy courtesy and made sure she had water before seeing to the animals. Katherine watched him work, noting the efficiency of his movements. the gentle way he handled the horses. There was something solid about Fletcher Vaughn, something trustworthy that eased the constant anxiety she had been carrying for so long. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked as they continued their journey. "5 years now. Bought the land with money I saved working cattle drives and what my uncle left me when he passed. Started with just a few head of cattle and 2 horses. Now I have about 200 head and a dozen good horses, including some wild mustangs I am training. It is not the biggest spread in Arizona, but it is mine, every acre paid for with honest work." "That is quite an accomplishment," Katherine said sincerely. "You should be proud." Fletcher glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face as though he was not used to receiving compliments. "Thank you. I am proud of it, though there is always more work to be done. The house needs repairs, the barn roof leaks, and I want to dig a better well come spring. Never enough hours in the day. Tell me about your foreman and the ranch hands. What should I know about them?" "Well, there is Samuel, my foreman. He is a good man, been with me from almost the beginning. Quiet, serious, knows cattle better than anyone I have ever met. Then there is young Tommy. He is only 19 but a hard worker. And the Martinez brothers, Carlos and Miguel. They came up from Mexico 2 years ago looking for work, and I have been grateful for them every day since. They are all decent men who will treat you with respect, or they will answer to me." The warning in his last words was subtle but clear, and Katherine felt oddly protected by it. "I will do my best to keep them fed properly. That is all I can ask." They reached the ranch just as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. The house was a low, sprawling adobe structure with a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. It was larger than Katherine had expected, clearly built to accommodate a family rather than a single man. The barn was well maintained despite Fletcher's claims about the roof, and there were several corrals containing horses. A smaller building that must be the bunkhouse stood off to one side. The whole setup spoke of someone who took pride in their property, even if they did not always have time for all the details. Fletcher pulled the wagon up to the front of the house and jumped down, coming around to help Katherine descend. Her legs were stiff from the long ride, and she stumbled slightly. His hand steadied her waist, and for a moment they stood very close, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his hazel eyes and smell the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. "Steady now," he said softly and released her as soon as she had her balance. Katherine stepped back, flustered by her reaction to his nearness. "Thank you." Before Fletcher could respond, a man emerged from the barn, tall and rangy with dark hair graying at the temples. He studied Katherine with sharp brown eyes before nodding a greeting. "Boss, did not expect you to bring back company. Samuel, this is Miss Katherine Drummond. She is going to be our new housekeeper. Katherine, this is Samuel Wells, my foreman." Samuel's expression remained neutral, but Katherine thought she detected a hint of relief in his eyes. "Nice to meet you, madam. We have been living rough since Mrs. Patterson left. Be good to have proper meals again." "I will do my best, Mr. Wells." "Just Samuel, madam. We do not stand much on formality out here." The other ranch hands appeared over the next few minutes, drawn by curiosity. Tommy was a lanky youth with red hair and an eager smile. Carlos and Miguel were both stocky and strong, with kind faces and limited English, though they managed to convey their pleasure at having a housekeeper again through enthusiastic nods and smiles. Fletcher showed Katherine through the house while the men unloaded the supplies. The interior was spacious but clearly neglected, with dust coating every surface and dishes piled in the kitchen. The main room served as both parlor and dining area, with a large stone fireplace and a long wooden table that could seat 8. The kitchen was separate, access through a doorway, and was well equipped with a large wood stove, a pump for water, and plenty of storage. There were 4 bedrooms, Fletcher explained, showing her through the house. He took the largest, which had been his uncle's. The second bedroom at the far end of the house from his would be hers. The other 2 were rarely used. "I know it is a mess," Fletcher said apologetically, surveying the dusty parlor. "I have been focused on the outside work and letting the house go. Mrs. Patterson would be horrified." "It just needs some attention," Katherine said, already mentally cataloging what needed to be done. "I can have it put to rights in a few days. Take whatever time you need. I am not expecting miracles." Fletcher carried her carpetbag to her room and set it on the bed. The room was simple but pleasant, with a large bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the hills. "I will leave you to settle in. Supper is usually around 6. Do not worry about anything fancy tonight. Whatever you can manage will be appreciated." After he left, Katherine stood in her new room and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Yesterday at this time, she had been on a train, full of hope and nervous anticipation about meeting the man she thought she would marry. Now she was in a cowboy's ranch house in Arizona, employed as a housekeeper for a man she had just met. Life, she reflected, was strange and unpredictable. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses in the small closet and arranging her hairbrush and other personal items on the dresser. Then she rolled up her sleeves and went to assess the kitchen. It was indeed in poor condition, but the basics were there. She found flour, salt, lard, and dried beans in the pantry, along with some questionable-looking bacon and a basket of eggs that were probably a few days old. It was enough to work with. By 6 o'clock, Katherine had managed to produce a meal of beans, bacon, fresh biscuits, and gravy. It was simple fare, but it was hot and plentiful, and when the men filed in and sat down at the long table, the appreciation on their faces was genuine. Fletcher took the head of the table, waving Katherine to the seat on his right. "You do not have to serve us," he said when she started to fill plates. "You work here, but you eat with us. We are not fancy folk." Katherine hesitated, then sat down. In her previous life, eating with the family had not been permitted. She was surprised to find she liked the informal atmosphere, the easy conversation between the men as they discussed the day's work and plans for tomorrow. They included her in the conversation, asking polite questions about where she came from without prying into why she had come west. When the meal was finished, Tommy and Carlos insisted on helping clear the table, waving away her protests. "Mrs. Patterson always let us help," Tommy explained with his eager grin. "She said cooking for this many men was enough work without doing all the cleanup too." Over the following days, Katherine threw herself into her work. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, washing windows, beating rugs, scrubbing floors until her hands were raw. She reorganized the kitchen, took inventory of supplies, and began planning meals that would be both nutritious and economical. She did the washing, hanging sheets and shirts on lines behind the house to dry in the surprisingly warm December sun. The cold front had indeed been an anomaly, and the weather had returned to the mild temperatures more typical of southern Arizona. Fletcher watched her work with what seemed like approval, though he said little. He was gone most days from dawn until dusk, working alongside his men to move cattle to better grazing, repair fences, and handle the 1,000 tasks that came with running a ranch. But he was always there for meals, and Katherine found herself looking forward to those times, to the sound of his voice as he discussed the day's events, to the rare smile that transformed his serious face. On her 4th day at the ranch, Katherine was kneading bread dough in the kitchen when Fletcher came in through the back door, his face troubled. "Katherine, I need to talk to you about something." She wiped her hands on her apron. "What is it?" "I just got word from a neighbor that there has been someone asking questions in town about you. A man claiming to be your husband, saying you ran away from him." Catherine's blood turned to ice. "What? I do not have a husband. I have never been married." "I figured as much, but I wanted to warn you. The man matches the description of the one who sent for you as a mail-order bride. Seems he did not take kindly to you not being there when he finally decided to show up." Fear clawed at Catherine's throat. She had known the man who wrote those letters was a liar, but she had not expected him to come looking for her. "What should I do?" Fletcher's jaw tightened. "Nothing. You stay here, and if he shows up, I will handle it. You are under my protection now, Katherine. No one is going to hurt you or force you into anything you do not want." The fierce protectiveness in his voice sent warmth flooding through Catherine's chest. "Thank you, Fletcher. I do not know what I would have done if you had not helped me. You would have figured something out. You are stronger than you think." His eyes held hers for a long moment, and Katherine felt that spark again, that connection she could not quite name. Then Fletcher cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should let you get back to your baking. Those biscuits last night were the best thing I have eaten in months." The man from the letters never came to the ranch, though Fletcher made discreet inquiries and learned he had left town after being told firmly by the sheriff that Katherine wanted nothing to do with him. As the days passed and turned into weeks, Katherine began to relax, to feel safe for the first time in years. The ranch became home in a way nowhere else ever had. She took pride in her work, in the clean house and the good meals, in the appreciation of the men she cooked for. Christmas came and went quietly. Katherine made a special dinner with a roasted chicken and apple pie, and Fletcher surprised her with a gift of a warm wool shawl in deep green. "Thought you might need it when the cold weather comes back," he said gruffly, not meeting her eyes. She had not expected a gift, and had nothing to give him in return, which embarrassed her until he insisted the excellent meal was gift enough. January brought more work as calving season approached. Fletcher was gone even longer hours, often coming back to the house exhausted and falling asleep in his chair by the fire after supper. Katherine found herself worrying about him, making sure he ate properly, leaving hot coffee ready for him when he came in from the cold morning air. She told herself it was just part of her job, but she knew it was more than that. She cared about Fletcher Vaughn in a way that had nothing to do with employment. One evening in late January, Katherine was mending one of Fletcher's shirts by lamplight when he came in from checking on a cow having trouble delivering. He was covered in mud and blood, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Lost the calf," he said heavily, sinking into a chair. "Damn it." Katherine set aside her mending and stood. "I am sorry. Let me heat some water so you can wash up. Have you eaten?" "Not hungry." "You need to eat anyway. Starving yourself will not bring back the calf." She spoke more sharply than she intended, but Fletcher just looked at her with something like gratitude in his eyes. "Yes, madam." While he washed up, Katherine heated the stew she had kept warming on the stove and cut thick slices of bread. When he returned to the main room, dressed in clean clothes with his hair still damp, she had everything set out at the table. She poured him coffee and sat across from him, not speaking, just keeping him company while he ate. After a while, some of the tension left his shoulders. "You are too good to me, Katherine," he said quietly. "I am doing my job. No, it is more than that. You care, and that is not something you can pay someone to do." He looked at her across the table, his hazel eyes serious. "I am glad you are here, gladder than I can properly say." Katherine's heart hammered in her chest. "I am glad I am here too." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings, and Katherine thought he might say something more, But then Fletcher looked away, draining his coffee cup. "I should get some sleep. Morning comes early." "Thank you for the meal." After he disappeared into his bedroom, Katherine sat alone at the table, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart still raced. She was falling in love with Fletcher Vaughn, she realized. Perhaps she had been falling in love with him since that first night at the train station when he had appeared like an answer to a prayer. She had not known she was praying. The knowledge terrified her because she had no idea if he felt the same way, and even if he did, there were so many reasons why it could not work. He was her employer. She was his housekeeper. The balance of power was all wrong, and Katherine refused to be any man's obligation. February arrived with warm days and cool nights. The desert bloomed unexpectedly after a brief rain, covering the hills with wildflowers. Katherine found excuses to be outside more, hanging laundry or tending the small vegetable garden she had started. Fletcher was finishing up a corral expansion, and she could watch him work from the garden, could see the play of muscles in his arms as he lifted heavy posts, the way sweat made his shirt cling to his back. It was improper to stare, but she could not seem to help herself. One afternoon, Samuel came to the kitchen door while Katherine was preparing supper. "Begging your pardon, Miss Katherine, but there is something you should see." Puzzled, Katherine followed him outside to the corral where Fletcher was working with a young Mustang. The horse was a beautiful sorrel with a white blaze, clearly wild and spirited, dancing at the end of a long lead rope. Fletcher moved with infinite patience, speaking in low, soothing tones, never forcing, always giving the horse the choice to come closer. Katherine watched, mesmerized by the trust building between man and animal. "He has been working with that mare for 3 weeks now," Samuel said quietly. "She is a beauty, but she was too wild for most men to bother with. Fletcher, though, he has a gift. Animals trust him." "Why are you showing me this?" Samuel gave her a knowing look. "Because you should know the kind of man he is, if you do not already. Fletcher Vaughn is the most honest, decent man I have ever known. He would cut off his own arm before he would hurt someone he cared about. And he cares about you, Miss Katherine, whether he has said so or not. I have known him 5 years, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Katherine's breath caught. "Samuel, I do not think. I am an old man, madam, and I see things. Just wanted you to know in case you were wondering." With that cryptic statement, Samuel walked away, leaving Katherine staring at Fletcher and the horse, her mind whirling. That night, Katherine could not sleep. She tossed and turned, thinking about Samuel's words, about the way Fletcher smiled at her across the dinner table, about the casual way he sometimes touched her shoulder in passing, about the longing she saw in his eyes when he thought she was not looking. Finally, she gave up on sleep and padded into the main room in her nightgown and wrapper, thinking to make some warm milk. Fletcher was there, standing by the window in the moonlight, still dressed in his trousers and shirt from supper. He turned when he heard her, and in the silvery light his face was open, vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "Could not sleep either," he asked. "Too much on my mind," Katherine admitted. "Same here." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Katherine, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." Her heart began to pound. "All right." Fletcher took a deep breath. "When I found you at that train station, I told you I helped you because of my sister, and that was true partly. But it was not the whole truth. The moment I saw you standing there, so brave and proud despite being frozen and alone, something in me just knew. I cannot explain it any better than that. I felt like I had been waiting my whole life for you to arrive on that train. Fletcher, please, let me finish. These past 2 months have been the best of my life, and it is because of you. Not because you cook and clean. though you do that wonderfully. But because you are here, because you smile at me over breakfast and sit with me after supper and make this house feel like a home for the first time ever. I know I am just a cowboy with a little ranch, and you could probably do better, but I am asking anyway. Katherine, would you consider letting me court you properly? I know the circumstances are not ideal with you working here, and if you say no, nothing changes, I swear. Your job is safe no matter what, but I have to ask because if I do not, I will regret it for the rest of my life. Katherine stared at him, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. You want to court me? Yes. More than I have ever wanted anything, yes. But why? I am not beautiful or accomplished or anything special. Fletcher crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just in front of her. How can you possibly think that? Katherine, you are the strongest, most capable, most beautiful woman I have ever met. You faced down disaster with courage and grace. You work harder than anyone I know. You are kind to men who are nothing but rough cowboys. You make me laugh. You make me want to be better. You are everything special. Tears spilled down Katherine's cheeks. I have been falling in love with you, she whispered. I tried not to because I thought it was hopeless, but I could not help it. Fletcher's face transformed with joy. Say that again. I love you, Fletcher Vaughn. He cupped her face in his calloused hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. Katherine Drummond, I have been in love with you since the moment I saw you. I have been waiting for you my whole life, and I did not even know it until you stepped off that train. When he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet and perfect, his lips warm against hers. Katherine melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, and the kiss deepened, became more urgent. They broke apart breathing hard, and Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this right, he said roughly. Proper courtship, proper marriage, all of it. You deserve that. I do not need proper, Katherine said. I just need you. You have me, sweetheart. For as long as you want me, you have me. They stood there in the moonlight, wrapped in each other's arms, and Katherine felt something settle in her chest, something she had been missing her whole life. She was home. She was loved. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, Fletcher announced to the ranch hands at breakfast that he was courting Katherine, and if anyone had a problem with it, they could take it up with him outside. The men just grinned and offered congratulations, clearly having seen this coming long before either Katherine or Fletcher had admitted their feelings. The courtship was sweet and old-fashioned, despite the fact that they lived in the same house. Fletcher was scrupulous about propriety, always leaving Katherine's door closed, never being alone with her in her room, though they spent long evenings talking by the fire after the work was done. He told her about his childhood, about surviving the Comanche raid that killed his parents and brother, about being raised by his gruff but loving uncle in Texas. She told him about losing her parents, about the difficult years that followed, about her hopes and dreams that she had almost given up on. On Sundays, their only day of rest, Fletcher would hitch up the wagon and take Katherine on drives through the beautiful desert landscape. They would pack a lunch and find some shady spot to spread a blanket, and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. Fletcher was not the silent cowboy she had first thought him to be. With her, he opened up, sharing his thoughts and feelings, his plans for the future, his dreams of expanding the ranch and maybe someday having a family. I always wanted children, he admitted one Sunday afternoon as they sat under a cottonwood tree near a creek. A whole houseful of them, enough to fill up that big house and make it noisy and chaotic and full of life. But I never thought I would find someone to share that with. How many children? Katherine asked, her heart full to bursting. As many as we are blessed with. 3, 4. A dozen if you are willing, he grinned at her. What about you? Do you want children? I do, Katherine said softly. I want a family. I want to give them all the love and stability I never had growing up." Fletcher pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Then we will make that happen. But first, I need to ask you something important." Catherine's pulse quickened. "What is that?" Fletcher shifted so he was facing her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Katherine Drummond, I know we have only known each other for 3 months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are my heart, my home, my future. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Katherine breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Fletcher, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Katherine kissed him back with all the love in her heart. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Fletcher reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was simple but beautiful, a gold band with a small diamond. "It was my mother's," he said as he slipped it onto her finger. "My uncle saved it from the raid and gave it to me before he died. I have been carrying it around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment." Katherine looked at the ring through her tears, overwhelmed by the significance of the gift. "It is perfect. You are perfect. I cannot believe this is real." "It is real, sweetheart. We are real. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes." They married a month later in early April, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Nogales with Mrs. Henderson, the ranch hands, and a few of Fletcher's neighbors in attendance. Katherine wore a dress of cream-colored lace that Mrs. Henderson had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers that Tommy had gathered from the hills. Fletcher wore a new suit that made him look unfamiliar and handsome, though Katherine preferred him in his usual work clothes. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Fletcher kissed her, Katherine felt like her heart might burst from happiness. The journey that had begun in despair at a frozen train station had led her to this moment, to this man, to this life that was more than she had ever dared to dream. The wedding celebration was held at the ranch, with Mrs. Henderson and several neighbor women providing food and a small cake. There was music and dancing, and Fletcher proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, spinning Katherine around the cleared space of the barn floor while everyone clapped and cheered. When the party finally wound down and the guests departed, Fletcher scooped Katherine up in his arms and carried her into the house, both of them laughing. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, full of whispered words and gentle touches. Fletcher was patient and careful with Katherine, making sure she felt safe and loved every moment. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Fletcher's bed, which was now their bed, and Katherine felt a peace she had never known before. "I love you, Mrs. Vaughn," Fletcher murmured against her hair. "I love you, Mr. Vaughn," Katherine replied, and then, because she could not resist, "I have been waiting for you too. I just did not know it until you found me." Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. Katherine continued to manage the house and cook for the ranch hands, but now she did so as the lady of the house rather than as an employee. Fletcher made sure she had help, hiring a young Mexican girl named Rosa to assist with the heavier cleaning and laundry. Katherine was grateful for the help, especially as she began to suspect she might be pregnant. By May, there was no doubt. Doc Miller confirmed what Katherine had already guessed, and Fletcher's reaction when she told him was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then immediately set her down carefully as though she might break. "Are you happy?" Katherine asked, though his reaction had made it clear. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Fletcher said, his hands framing her face. "We are going to have a baby, our baby. Katherine, you have given me everything I ever wanted." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer heat. Katherine felt well aside from being tired and experiencing occasional nausea, and she continued her work with Rosa's help. Fletcher was comically overprotective, constantly asking if she needed to sit down or if she was doing too much. Katherine found it endearing rather than annoying, though she did have to firmly tell him she was pregnant, not an invalid. In late August, Fletcher surprised her by announcing he had hired an additional hand specifically to help with the housework, so Katherine could rest more as her pregnancy advanced. The new hire was a widow named Margaret who was efficient and kind, and Katherine was grateful for her presence as her belly grew larger and moving became more difficult. The baby arrived in late January of 1885, in the middle of a cold night with Doc Miller and Mrs. Henderson in attendance. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Katherine thought she could not continue. But Fletcher was there, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, and somehow she found the strength to push through. When the baby's first cry filled the room, Katherine sobbed with relief and joy. "It is a boy," Doc Miller announced, placing the squalling infant on Katherine's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Fletcher stared at his son with wonder, his eyes suspiciously bright. "He is perfect. You are perfect." "Katherine, I cannot believe we made this." They named him James Fletcher Vaughn after Fletcher's father. Jamie, as they quickly began calling him, had his father's hazel eyes and his mother's delicate features, and from the beginning he had both parents wrapped around his tiny fingers. Fletcher proved to be a devoted father, getting up with Katherine for midnight feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just holding his son and staring at him in awe. The ranch continued to prosper. Fletcher expanded his herd and bought additional land from a neighbor who was moving back east. He hired 2 more hands to help manage the increased workload. The house that had once felt too large for one man was now filled with the sounds of life. Jamie's cries and gurgles, Katherine's laughter, Fletcher's deep voice singing off-key lullabies. When Jamie was 6 months old, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. Fletcher was thrilled, though he worried about Katherine handling 2 babies so close together. But Katherine felt strong and healthy, and with Margaret's help, she managed beautifully. Their daughter arrived in April of 1886, 3 weeks early but healthy and perfect. They named her Emma Katherine Vaughn, after Fletcher's lost sister. Emma had her mother's dark blonde hair and her father's warm smile, and Jamie seemed to accept his little sister with the easy adaptability of a toddler. Fletcher expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The ranch hand's dining table was moved to the bunkhouse now that Samuel had taken over cooking duties for the men, giving the main house more space for the growing family. Katherine decorated their home with care, hanging curtains she sewed herself, placing wildflowers in vases, creating a space that was warm and welcoming. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Tommy eventually left to start his own small ranch with Fletcher's help and blessing. Carlos and Miguel brought their wives up from Mexico, and the 2 couples built small homes on the edge of Fletcher's property, becoming permanent parts of the ranch family. Samuel stayed on as foreman, growing older but no less capable, and eventually taking in his orphan nephew to raise. Katherine and Fletcher's family continued to grow. A second son, Thomas William, arrived in 1888, followed by another daughter, Sarah Grace, in 1890. The house rang with the sounds of children playing, and Fletcher built a swing in the big cottonwood near the house where they all fought for turns. Through it all, Katherine and Fletcher's love only deepened. They still took Sunday drives when they could, now with a wagon full of children, finding spots to picnic and let the kids run wild. They still sat together by the fire in the evenings after the children were in bed, talking about their day, making plans for the future, just enjoying each other's presence. Fletcher still looked at Katherine like she was the most precious thing in his world, and Katherine still felt her heart skip when he walked into a room. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Fletcher took Katherine back to Nogales, arranging for Margaret to watch the children for the night. They stayed at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, in the same room where Katherine had spent that first night after Fletcher found her. In the morning, they visited the train station, standing on the platform where their story had begun. "You ever regret it?" Fletcher asked, his arm around her waist. "That you came west, that things turned out the way they did." Katherine leaned into him, thinking about everything she had gained from that terrible, freezing night. "Not for a single moment. The man who abandoned me here did me the greatest favor of my life, because it meant you found me instead. Every hardship I endured was worth it, because it led me to you." Fletcher turned her to face him, his hazel eyes serious and full of love. "I told you that night that I had been waiting for you, and it was true. You were always meant to be mine, Katherine, just like I was always meant to be yours. We were meant to find each other." "I've been waiting for you too," Katherine whispered, echoing the words she had said on their wedding night. "I just did not know it until you were standing in front of me, offering me hope when I thought I had none left." They kissed there on the platform. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a love that was stronger than anything the harsh western landscape could throw at them. They returned to the ranch that afternoon to find their children had made them an anniversary cake with Margaret's help. It was lopsided and the frosting was uneven, but it was made with love, and Katherine and Fletcher praised it as though it were a masterpiece. That night, after the children were finally in bed, Fletcher pulled Katherine into his arms in their bedroom. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For saying yes. For taking a chance on a dusty cowboy with a little ranch in Arizona. For giving me a family and a home and a reason to wake up smiling every morning. For being you." Katherine reached up to cup his bearded cheek, looking into the eyes she loved so much. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for caring when no one else did. For loving me when I did not think I was worth loving, for making all my dreams come true." They made love slowly that night, reaffirming their commitment to each other, celebrating the life they had built together. Afterward, Katherine lay with her head on Fletcher's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt overwhelmingly grateful for the unexpected path her life had taken. The years continued to roll by. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and interests. Jamie proved to have his father's gift with horses and spent hours in the corrals learning the family business. Emma was quieter, preferring books and drawing, though she could ride as well as any of her brothers. Thomas was the wild one, always getting into mischief, but with such charm that it was hard to stay angry with him. Sarah was still young enough to be everyone's darling, toddling after her older siblings and trying to do everything they did. In 1892, Fletcher's ranch was one of the most prosperous in the region. He had been elected to the territorial council, giving him a voice in Arizona's governance as the territory moved slowly toward statehood. Katherine was proud of him, though she worried about the additional time it took him away from home. But Fletcher never let his duties interfere with his family. He made sure to be home for supper every night possible, to tuck the children into bed, to save time just for Katherine. One evening in late summer, after the children were asleep, Fletcher found Katherine on the front porch, watching the stars. He sat down beside her, pulling her against his side. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything. How different my life is now compared to what I thought it would be. If someone had told me that night at the train station that in less than 10 years I would have all this, I never would have believed them." "You miss your old life at all?" Katherine laughed. Miss working 16-hour days in a textile mill for pennies. Miss living with relatives who resented my presence. No, Fletcher, I do not miss any of it. This life, this family, this is everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dared to hope for. Good, Fletcher said, satisfied. Because I plan to keep you for at least another 50 years, if not longer. Only 50, Katherine teased. Well, maybe 60 or 70. However long we get, it will not be enough. I will always want more time with you. Katherine turned to kiss him, pouring all her love into the gesture. When they broke apart, Fletcher was smiling that rare, beautiful smile that she still treasured after all these years. I love you, Katherine Vaughn. More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. I love you too, Fletcher. Always and forever. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges life brought, they would face them together. The woman who had been abandoned at a frozen train station had found her home, her love, her everything in the arms of a cowboy who had been waiting for her. As the years progressed into the late 1890s, the Vaughn Ranch became something of a landmark in the region. Fletcher's reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock spread throughout Arizona and into neighboring territories. Cattle buyers from as far away as California came to purchase his stock, and the horses he trained were sought after by ranchers and the U.S. cavalry alike. Katherine became known in her own right as a woman of substance. She started a small school on the ranch property for her own children and those of the ranch hands, hiring a young teacher from back east and housing her in one of the expanded outbuildings. She organized community gatherings, helped new settlers get established, and became a voice for women's concerns in the growing territory. Jamie grew into a tall, serious young man much like his father, with a natural gift for ranching. By the time he was 16, Fletcher was trusting him with significant responsibilities, and the boy never let him down. Emma pursued her artistic talents, eventually selling her drawings and paintings of Western life to magazines back east. Thomas, true to form, was a handful but showed promise in horse training, having inherited his father's patience and gift with animals. Sarah grew into a spirited girl who could outride and outshoot her brothers, much to their chagrin and their father's pride. In 1898, when Katherine was 34 and Fletcher was 42, they welcomed a surprise fifth child, another boy they named Daniel Samuel after his godfather. The older children doted on the baby, and Katherine laughed that she had more help than she knew what to do with. Fletcher joked that they might need to add on to the house again, but he looked at his large family with such contentment that Katherine knew he would not change a thing. That year also brought challenges. A drought hit the region hard, and many smaller ranchers went under. Fletcher worked tirelessly to keep his own operation afloat while also helping his neighbors however he could. He sold cattle at a loss to keep them from starving, shared water from his wells, and extended credit at his own expense. Katherine worried about him, seeing the stress in the lines around his eyes, but she also saw the man she had fallen in love with, the one who could not walk away from someone in need. "We will get through this," Fletcher assured her one night as they reviewed the account books. "We have savings and we are better established than most. It would take more than a drought to bring us down." "I know," Katherine said. "I just hate seeing you work so hard and have so little to show for it. Are you joking?" Fletcher gestured around them, at the house where 3 of their children slept upstairs and 2 others were doing homework at the big table. "I have everything to show for it. A thriving ranch, yes, but more importantly, I have you and our children. We are healthy and happy and together. That is what matters, Katherine. The rest is just details." She kissed him, grateful as always for his perspective. How did I get so lucky? I ask myself the same thing every day, though I prefer to think it was fate rather than luck. We were meant to find each other. The drought broke in early 1899 with rains that turned the desert green and replenished the depleted water sources. The ranch recovered quickly, and Fletcher's generosity during the difficult time earned him even more respect in the community. When Arizona began serious moves toward statehood, Fletcher was mentioned as a possible candidate for senator once that became a reality. On December 31, 1899, as the century drew to a close, the Vaughn family gathered for a celebration at the ranch. Neighbors and friends joined them, the house packed with people and noise and laughter. At midnight, as everyone cheered and embraced, Fletcher pulled Katherine aside onto the porch. "A new century," he said, looking out at the land he loved. "When I was a boy, I never imagined I would live to see it, let alone that I would see it with a wife and 5 children and a successful ranch. Life is strange and wonderful." "It is," Katherine agreed. "And it all started because you saw a woman freezing at a train station and decided to help her." Fletcher turned to her, his hazel eyes reflecting the lamplight from inside. "I did not just see a woman who needed help. I saw my future. I saw the person who would make me whole. I told you I had been waiting for you, and I meant it in ways I did not even fully understand at the time. You are my other half, Katherine. You always have been." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes, even after all these years, still moved by his words. "And you are mine. I thought my life was over that night. I thought I had made a terrible mistake and there was no way forward. But you showed me that endings are just beginnings in disguise. You gave me hope and love and a reason to believe in happy endings." They kissed as fireworks someone had brought from Tucson exploded overhead, painting the sky with color. Inside, their children were laughing and playing with the other young people. Around them, their land stretched out fertile and peaceful. It was a perfect moment, a snapshot of a life built on love and hard work and unwavering faith in each other. The new century brought new opportunities and new challenges. Statehood for Arizona was still more than a decade away, but the territory was growing and changing rapidly. The railroad expanded, bringing more people and more commerce. Towns grew into small cities. The wild frontier of Fletcher's youth was slowly being tamed, though the ranch remained a place where the old ways still held strong. Jamie married at 21 to a rancher's daughter from Tucson, a sweet-faced girl named Clara who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the northern edge of the Vaughn property and began their own family, making Katherine and Fletcher grandparents for the first time when their grandson was born in 1902. Fletcher had tears in his eyes when he held the baby, marveling at how the cycle continued. Emma surprised everyone by moving to San Francisco to study art, though she returned regularly and maintained close ties with her family. Her paintings of Arizona landscapes became popular, and she sold them through galleries in California and back east, sending money home that Fletcher immediately sent back with stern instructions for her to keep it for herself. Thomas apprenticed with a horse trainer in Colorado for a few years before returning home to work on the ranch alongside his father and brother. Sarah, now a teenager, was already drawing the attention of young men, much to Fletcher's displeasure and Katherine's amusement. Daniel, still young, showed signs of being the scholar of the family, always with his nose in a book. In 1905, Fletcher and Katherine celebrated their 21st wedding anniversary. Fletcher planned an elaborate party, inviting everyone they knew, but Katherine's favorite part was when he took her back to that spot by the creek where he had proposed and renewed their vows, just the two of them under the cottonwood tree. 21 years, Fletcher said, sliding a new ring onto her finger alongside her wedding band and his mother's ring. "And I love you more now than I did the day we married. You are my heart, Katherine. You always will be." "And you are mine," Katherine replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Everything good in my life comes from you. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "No," Fletcher said firmly. "We saved each other. I was just existing before you, Katherine, going through the motions. You made me want to live again. You gave me a reason to build something lasting. We did this together." They celebrated their anniversary in the bed they had shared for over 2 decades, their lovemaking as passionate as it had been in their youth, seasoned now with deep knowledge of each other's bodies and hearts. Afterward, Katherine lay in Fletcher's arms and thought about the journey that had brought them here. 21 years ago, she had been a desperate woman with no prospects and no hope. Now she was loved, cherished, the mother of 5 and grandmother of 1, with a life so full of joy she sometimes feared it was a dream she would wake from. But it was not a dream. It was real as the man sleeping beside her, his arm heavy and warm across her waist. It was real as the calluses on her hands from decades of work, as the laugh lines around her eyes from years of smiling, as the love that had only grown stronger with time. The years continued their steady march. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with a new generation of laughter. Fletcher gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to Jamie while still maintaining an active role. He joked that retirement did not suit him, that he would die with his boots on, and Katherine believed him. She could not imagine Fletcher ever truly stopping, ever not being involved in the land and animals he loved so much. Katherine herself found new purpose in her middle years, working with other women in the territory to establish schools and libraries, to advocate for better medical care in rural areas, to create social networks that helped settlers survive and thrive. Fletcher supported her efforts completely, proud of the difference she made in so many lives. In 1910, as they approached their 26th anniversary, Fletcher came home one evening with a telegram that made his face light up. "It is happening," he said, waving the paper. "Congress is seriously considering statehood for Arizona. They are saying it could happen within a few years." Katherine hugged him, knowing how much this meant to him. "You have been working toward this for so long. We all have. This territory has grown up, Katherine. It is ready to stand on its own. I just hope I live to see it." "You will," Katherine said firmly. "You are too stubborn to do otherwise." Fletcher laughed and kissed her. "True enough, though I think you might be the stubborn one in this family, Mrs. Vaughn." "I learned from the best, Mr. Vaughn." On February 14, 1912, Arizona was admitted to the Union as the 48th state. Fletcher and Katherine traveled to Phoenix for the celebration, joining thousands of others in witnessing history. When the announcement was made official, Fletcher had tears streaming down his face, and Katherine held his hand tight, sharing in his joy. The wild territory he had helped build was now a state, a permanent part of the nation. It felt like the culmination of a lifetime of work. That night in their hotel room in Phoenix, Fletcher held Katherine close. "We did it," he whispered. "We lived to see it." "We did," Katherine agreed. "And look at everything else we have lived to see, our children grown and happy, grandchildren, a ranch that will continue for generations. We have built something lasting, Fletcher, something that will outlive us both." "I know. And it is all because you said yes to a dusty cowboy at a train station." Katherine laughed. "And because that cowboy saw something worth saving in a half-frozen woman who had lost everything." "I saw everything I ever wanted," Fletcher corrected. "I saw you." They made love slowly, celebrating not just Arizona's statehood but their own journey, the life they had built together from nothing. At 56 and 48, they were no longer young, but their passion for each other had never dimmed. If anything, it had deepened, become something richer and more complex, woven through with decades of shared experiences and unconditional love. The years after statehood were good ones. The ranch continued to prosper under Jamie's capable management, with Thomas and young Daniel both contributing their skills. Emma married a banker from San Francisco but visited regularly, always bringing her husband and children to spend summers at the ranch. Sarah married a neighboring rancher and settled close enough to visit weekly, adding more grandchildren to the ever-growing family. Katherine and Fletcher settled into the role of family patriarchs, the foundation upon which their growing dynasty was built. They were consulted on major decisions, doted on by grandchildren, respected throughout the region. But they never stopped being partners, never stopped talking and laughing and finding joy in each other's company. On a warm April evening in 1915, they sat together on the porch swing Fletcher had hung years ago, watching the sun set over the hills. Katherine was 61 now, her hair more silver than blonde, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. Fletcher was 65, his hair mostly gray, his body still strong despite the years of hard work. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, simply enjoying being together. "You remember what I said to you that night at the train station?" Fletcher asked suddenly. Katherine smiled. "You said several things. Which particular statement are you referring to?" "When I convinced you to let me help you, I said I had been waiting for you. I remember. It seemed like an odd thing to say to a stranger. It was the truth, though. I had been waiting for you, I just had not known it until that moment. The second I saw you, something in me just knew. You were what was missing from my life. You were the answer to prayers I had not even realized I was praying." Katherine squeezed his hand. "I felt it too, even though I was too scared and desperate to recognize it at first. But looking back, I knew from the start that you were different, that you were important. My heart knew even if my mind needed time to catch up." 32 years, Fletcher said wonderingly. "We have been together for 32 years, Katherine. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like you have always been here." "I cannot imagine my life without you in it," Katherine said. "You are woven into every part of me, Fletcher. When I think about who I am, you are always there. We grew together, became ourselves together." Fletcher pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Katherine Vaughn. I love you more than words can express. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and marrying you was the smartest thing I ever did. I love you too, Fletcher. Forever and always, until my last breath and beyond." They sat together as the stars emerged, as they had done thousands of times before and would do thousands of times more. The ranch was quiet around them, peaceful in the gathering darkness. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. Closer, in one of the homes on the property, their grandchildren played. It was the sound of family, of legacy, of love that had started with two people and had expanded to touch dozens of lives. As the years progressed into the 1920s, Fletcher began to slow down. He was in his 70s now, and while his spirit was still willing, his body was not always cooperative. Katherine, now in her mid-60s, was in better health but refused to do anything that did not include Fletcher. They had spent over 35 years rarely separated, and they were not about to start now. They spent their days quietly, still involved in ranch life, but in an advisory capacity rather than a hands-on one. Fletcher worked with his grandchildren, teaching them the skills he had learned over a lifetime. Katherine hosted family dinners every Sunday, her table always crowded with children and grandchildren, and now even a few great-grandchildren. The house that had once seemed too large for one man was now bursting with life. In the summer of 1923, the family gathered to celebrate Fletcher and Katherine's 38th wedding anniversary. Over 100 people attended, testament to the community they had built and the lives they had touched. Speeches were made, toasts were offered, and through it all, Fletcher kept Katherine's hand in his, anchoring himself to her as he had always done. Late that night, after everyone had left and the house was finally quiet, Fletcher and Katherine retired to their bedroom. Fletcher moved slowly, his joints protesting, but he smiled at Katherine with all the warmth of their youth. "That was quite a celebration," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It was. We are very blessed, Fletcher. Look at what we have created." "We did well, did we not?" Fletcher looked at her, his eyes still that striking hazel that had captured her heart so long ago. 5 children, all happy and successful, more grandchildren than I can count, great-grandchildren now. The ranch is stronger than ever. We have lived a good life, Katherine." "We have," she agreed, coming to stand before him. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close, and she ran her fingers through his gray hair. "The very best life." "I have no regrets," Fletcher said quietly. "Well, I wish I had found you sooner, wish we had more years together. We have had 38 wonderful years. That is more than many people get." "It is not enough. 100 years would not be enough." Katherine kissed him softly. "Then we will have to make the most of whatever time we have left, just like we always have." They made love that night with the gentle tenderness of long familiarity, celebrating their life together, their enduring passion. Afterward, Katherine fell asleep in Fletcher's arms, safe and loved, exactly where she belonged. Fletcher lived for 2 more years, remaining active and engaged until very near the end. He died in early September of 1925, at the age of 75, with Katherine holding his hand and all his children gathered around his bed. His last words were, "I love you," directed at Katherine, and he went peacefully, a slight smile on his face. Katherine thought the grief might kill her. For 39 years, Fletcher had been her anchor, her home, her heart. She had never spent more than a few days apart from him, and now he was gone. She had understood intellectually that one of them would go first, but she had always assumed it would be her. The thought of living without him seemed impossible. But Katherine was stronger than she knew, a strength Fletcher had always seen in her. She grieved deeply but did not break. She leaned on her children, found solace in her grandchildren, and slowly learned to navigate a world without Fletcher's physical presence. Though she felt him with her always, in the wind that rustled the cottonwoods, in the sunset over the hills, in the love that surrounded her. She lived for another 12 years, active and engaged, maintaining the family gatherings Fletcher had loved, telling stories about their life together to grandchildren and great-grandchildren who hung on every word. She made sure Fletcher's legacy lived on, that his values of hard work, integrity, and helping those in need were passed down through the generations. Katherine Vaughn died peacefully in her sleep in June of 1937, at the age of 73, surrounded by family in the house Fletcher had built for them. Her last conscious thought was of that night at the train station, of a tall cowboy with kind eyes saying, "I have been waiting for you." She had been waiting for him too, she realized, waiting to go home, waiting to be with her heart again. They buried her next to Fletcher on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the blue Arizona sky they had both loved. The entire community attended the funeral, testament to the woman she had been and the lives she had touched. Her children and grandchildren stood together, a united family that was her and Fletcher's greatest legacy. As the years passed, the Vaughn ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations just as Fletcher and Katherine had hoped. Their story became family legend, told and retold, the tale of how their great-grandmother had been abandoned at a train station, and their great-grandfather had said, "I have been waiting for you," and started a love story that lasted nearly 4 decades and produced a family dynasty. The house they had shared still stood, expanded and modernized but fundamentally the same. The cottonwood where Fletcher had proposed and renewed their vows grew tall and strong. The land they had worked together continued to prosper under the care of their descendants. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right over the Arizona hills, you could almost hear them, Fletcher's deep voice and Katherine's lighter one, talking and laughing as they had done for 39 years. Two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life on love and faith and hard work, who had shown that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the greatest blessings. Katherine had been abandoned at a frozen train station with no hope and no future. Fletcher had been a lonely cowboy with a successful ranch but an empty house. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a love that transcended death, a family that would carry their legacy forward for generations. Their story proved that sometimes the person you are meant to find appears in the most unexpected way at the most desperate moment. Sometimes the ending you fear is actually a beginning in disguise. Sometimes the greatest love stories start with 6 simple words: "I have been waiting for you." And in the end, they both had been waiting, though neither had known it until the moment their eyes met on that cold December night in 1883. They had been waiting for each other, for the love that would define the rest of their lives, for the partnership that would build an empire and raise a family, and prove that happily ever after is not just a fairy tale but something that can be achieved through commitment, respect, and unwavering devotion. The Vaughn family continued to thrive, each generation adding their own chapters to the story that began with Katherine and Fletcher. They named children after them, told their story at family gatherings, visited their graves on anniversaries. The love that had started between 2 people rippled outward, affecting dozens and then hundreds of lives, proving that one act of kindness on a cold night can change the world. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Fletcher and Katherine were together again, holding hands and watching over the family they had created, the land they had loved, the legacy they had built. They were home. They were together. They were exactly where they had always been meant to be, from that first moment at the train station when their eyes met and their hearts recognized each other. "I have been waiting for you." The truest words Fletcher Vaughn ever spoke, and the foundation of a love story that proved that sometimes, against all odds and despite all obstacles, true love does exist. You just have to be willing to see it when it appears, to take a chance on a stranger, to believe that happy endings are possible even when all seems lost. Katherine and Fletcher's story lived on, a beacon of hope and proof that love, real and lasting love, is worth waiting for.